charge of Optimera, an AI-powered retail optimization suite, our upcoming speaker has taken this platform from concept to a new business line for TCS with 35 plus patents. It has been implemented for several Fortune 500 companies, driving multi billion dollar growth for its customers and is helping them to drive their purpose. In addition to winning several awards and accolades at work, she is also the proud recipient of the Sponsors Award at Mrs. India Worldwide 2019. Through her Power Talk today, she is all set to address on how artificial intelligence can be beneficial in retail through optimization. Taking charge of his screens right now, please welcome Ms. Shilpa Rao.
Hello everyone, this is Shilpa Rao. I'm an AI entrepreneur and product head for an AI-powered strategic intelligence platform, which has been implemented for several Fortune 500 companies, and it has helped them to enable their purpose and also drive profitability with multi-billion dollar uplift in sales and margins. The platform has been awarded by several awards, including the AI Iconics, TV American Business Awards, and others. And I hold several of the 35 plus patents that we have for this platform. Today, we are going to really look at how business use cases in retail shape up and how AI can really help in that. So before we get deeper into what are the use cases and what AI can help in, let's just talk about what is happening in the retail world and what are the priorities of retailers and how are they shifting. We all know how the past 2 years have been, and several other conditions such as the war, which is ongoing, and the other challenges in terms of the supply chain issues and the ongoing oil crisis and everything else drives retailers to really rethink on how they should drive their business. So one of the key priority for retailer is obviously driving growth. But what has happened from a retail perspective is that the margins are shrinking, and that's linked to a lot of cost which is going in from a retail perspective. So earlier retailers, almost 70 to 80% of most retailers, which are brick and mortar, a lot of their revenue used to come from the in-store. But now what has happened is that as the demand is shifting, a lot of these retailers are moving online, and the demand from an online has now taken up to 30 and 40 and sometimes even 50% for some of the other retailers. Now the cost of actually getting the goods to the customer is very high, and many retailers have really struggling with the ongoing cost from a supply chain perspective, from a labor perspective, from a transportation perspective, which are rising up. They're really finding it difficult to find that sweet spot from a margin perspective. And that's where many retailers are really looking at how they can expand their businesses into different areas, so that they can actually be a holistic provider for their customers. And this includes things like there are many retailers who have expanded into health and wellness business. There are retailers such as Walmart, which has opened up pharmacies, and they are kind of getting into primary care business. Another examples could be from CVS and Walgreens in US, where they have said that I will be the primary care for the customer, which includes diagnostics, clinics, and everything else which a customer needs from a health and wellness perspective. Also, there are retailers who have got into financial businesses. There are retailers who have got into food businesses. So expanding beyond what they offer, so that and identify new lines of businesses which can drive their margin is one of the priorities which we see many retailers going through. When you're kind of looking at the growth side, you have to also look at the cost side. And bending the cost curve is, again, another big priority. As we all know, we have seen the supply chain clocks which have happened over the past 2 years. We had seen trailers and trailers waiting just to kind of be shipped or actually to kind of get the goods delivered. And we had seen the entire logistical nightmare which happened in the past 2 years. And it's still kind of resolving itself. And meanwhile, there is, changes from a labor perspective in terms of the talent which is required. There is a perennial shortage of truck drivers globally. So a lot of these are also adding to the cost of the goods sold, and retailers do not want to pass out all these costs to their customers. So they want to kind of curb the inflation as much as possible. Now, when you have to do that, you really have to look at strategies which can help you to determine how can you best reduce your cost and optimize it through your entire supply chain and your value chain. Similarly, supply chain has always been about optimizing the supply chain. Now, this is the first time when you're kind of looking at resilience, because as you see the world changing and we don't know if the next wave is coming or not, the entire resilience becomes a very important factor. And that's what retailers are focusing on. How can they build resilience within the supply chain? The next one is sustainability. Sustainability is no longer just a hashtag goal, but it is something which the business has to imbibe in every business process. It's not just goal of a chief sustainability officer, or it's just not a goal of a CSR team, which was it earlier. It is a core business which is happening today. And this includes right from how you're kind of planning, to your designing, to your production, to your end supply chain, and then last mile delivery. How can you imbibe sustainability standards across the board becomes very essential. And it is also about how retailers can find more purpose in what they do. A lot of retailers have embarked on making those bold statements. Like, for example, one of the retailers said that I will not carry any product which has artificial ingredients in them. And then there are retailers who are talking about circular fashion. There are retailers who are talking about eliminating plastic from their entire value chain. So a lot of these goals which retailers have committed to and are very serious about, contributing to this, towards it, make sustainability at the heart of their business. Apart from this, simulation is very, very important for most businesses today. Now, the simulation is that typically most systems and most forecasting was done based on historical data. Now, what has happened in the past 2 years is that all the historical data which was taken into account may or may not show the patterns which will happen in the future. And as we kind of enter a very dynamic age, it is important that we actually look forward rather than look backward in terms of how do you kind of project the business is going to be. And that's where a lot of simulatory and behavioral capabilities are required for you to really understand how you want to shape your business and move forward. And this requires both a combination of human intelligence and machine intelligence, and how can you help humans to leverage AI and machine intelligence better so that you can optimize that entire process, and also help you to kind of imbibe that intelligence and bring in efficiency, and at the same time value the human ingenuity and the art which it brings along. So how they kind of work in tandem becomes very important. Now, given these priorities of the retailers, we see a lot of use cases across the board which help retailers to really leapfrog into the next stage with AI. Now, typically what we find is that many use cases which we hear about or which we see are mainly in the customer experience or the trade side of things. And we all have experienced them as users and also have read and heard about it. And this includes things like targeted advertisements or personalization, which leverages the power of AI to really identify your context, your all your attributes, to really figure out what is the right offer or what is the right set of products that should be offered to you. Also, we have also seen things like Amazon Go, which leverages again the power of AI in terms of computer vision, in terms of all these sensors, considering all the sensor data and identifying which item is picked up, how can you do a complete seamless cashierless checkout. So that entire experience is also something that we have seen in videos or experienced it. where the power of AI is leveraged. And then we have also seen it in chatbots and customer service side of things, where again a lot of AI is used in terms of NLP and others. And then there are other areas where you experience it with virtual mirrors and interact with it. So a lot of these use cases which we have seen are just the tip of the iceberg, more on the customer experience, more on the trade side of things. But there is a whole bunch of other use cases which retailers can adopt to really imbibe AI in every part of their business so that they can drive that intelligence right from planning to actually when the product reaches the customer. And this includes things like, driving from a price promotion markdown perspective, or even negotiating with the vendor. How can you leverage the power of things like reinforcement learning to get a better deal with the vendor, considering dynamic factors which are going in it, or things like how do you kind of look at freshness management to understand dynamically that what is the aging of certain fruits or vegetables, and then how can you have real time alerts and how can you manage that inventory better so that you not have as much wastage. So there are a lot of these use cases, and we're going to talk about some of this in the next few slides. So one of the biggest challenge for the retailer is there are a lot of decisions that every team within retailer has to make. And this includes decisions where they have a complexity of data. Like, for example, a retailer is talking about like, I don't know, 35 crore products, and then maybe they have 4,000 to 5,000 stores. And then getting in this into the complexity, the number of transactions and the number of customers per day. So the complexity with which the retailer deals with is really huge. And that's where a lot of the power of AI can really help them to identify where these insights could drive and could help them to connect the dots so that you can give an experience to the customer, at the same time really look at how can you bring in efficiencies from an operational science perspective, look at how can you really drive meaning in terms of the goals that you have set for yourself and others. So coming down to the key areas within retails that we see where AI can really help. So right starts from the financial planning side in terms of how can you really look at on your planning side, right from the financial planning, merchandise planning, capacity planning, labor planning. How can you leverage again deep insights in terms of considering, for example, from an inventory planning perspective, how can you consider the customer insight in terms of the behavioral dynamics, the customer demographics? How can you consider the attributes which customers really look for in an item? How do you understand what is the transferability which happens within the items? So that if one item is not present, will the customer go and shift to another one? And then if, like for example, if you're looking for coffee creamers or dairy creamers, if you don't have hazelnut, will you go and shift to a vanilla, or you will not shift to a vanilla? Understanding those subtle preferences within the customer becomes very important. And understanding that with data makes it very relevant so that you can actually plan how much inventory that you need to hold and how many varieties that you need to carry in that entire assortment. Now, this also goes beyond in terms of understanding what is the right mix that you need to carry in for both from an online and offline perspective, because these mix essentially help you to determine who is the customer that you're serving. Are you giving the customer enough choices, and also understanding the customer preferences? And given that today the cost of supply chain and cost of actually delivering it to the customers are higher, how can you preempt what the customer would want to buy, and based on that have things which could be preemptively shipped at a nearby location so that you exactly know, and you are kind of streamlining your transportation so that the customer is getting things from a same day delivery perspective, or from an online buy online pick up in a store perspective. So again, how can you get it faster? So also from a merchandising perspective, things like how do you look at your entire store space, and how do you provide space to different categories within the store? And as demand is shifted online, How can you create more experience centers within the store where the customer would come in to experience things? Like, for example, if you're expanding into newer categories, how can you make space? Like, for example, health clinics. How can you make space for a wellness center within the store? How can you make space for a salon within the store? Or how can you make space for digital media and others, an experience center within the store, so that you can leverage that space to bring in the customer and also optimize the overall sales for that particular category, and be it online and be it on the store. So a lot of these decisions again require you to understand a lot of different factors which are going behind the scenes. And there are thousands and thousands of factors which you really have to consider in terms of your customer preferences, who your customer is, what is the context that they are coming in, how do you determine are they price sensitive or they're not price sensitive, what is the kind of offer that which is relevant to them and in what context. So a lot of such things have to be determined for you to really drive that customer experience. And that's where understanding all of that from a merchandising perspective becomes important. Now, driving that to supply chain. Again, supply chain is a complex system where you really need to kind of understand that how do you determine that how much you need to buy and how much you need to kind of hold, considering a lot of factors, like considering that your warehouse capacity, considering what is the labor availability at the warehouse, things like layer picking. How can you pick items which you have stored in the warehouse in an efficient way? How can you optimize the labor which is there in the warehouse? And then how do you plan for the trucks? What are the items that you need to kind of fit into the truck? What is their packaging? How can you optimize so that you can pack more in a truck, so that you optimize that container size or the logistics, so that you can optimize the route? So a lot of this again leverages the power of AI to identify what's the right mix and what is the best route that the truck has to go through, or what is the best way in which the capacity of the truck is fully utilized, what is the best way in which the warehouse is completely utilized, and how can you ensure that the supply chain and the deliveries are made on time and the product is available. So a lot of such decisions again are dynamic and require the power of AI to determine what how these trade-offs have to be done in real time in many cases to really drive that efficiency and reduce the cost. And then coming from a trade perspective, this is where a lot of the things that we see today is what we experience. Like, for example, how do you look at marketing? How can you imbibe the marketing information right to the merchandising, to the planning, so that you know that these are the items which you're going to show for a particular user on the screen. And that's where you need to have more inventory on that. Otherwise, you'll run out of stock. So how do you kind of link that back into the core processes becomes very important. And all of this then driven by customer experience and things like search, personalization, and then also interaction in terms of visual and smart experience becomes very important. So we see that while the tip of the iceberg is more on what the user experiences, but in the business itself, there are so many opportunities through which AI can really help. And this is in terms of both computer vision, in terms of deep learning, neural networks, reinforcement learning, various use cases, leverage a lot of these algorithms to solve a lot of these problems, including inventory, supply chain, forecasting. And from a visual perspective, how can you identify spills which are there in the store? How can you identify theft? And a lot of others. So all these use cases really help retailers to drive business more efficiently. Now, while we all understand that AI can really help in every part of the business, it's not just on the customer experience. But what happens is that there are a lot of challenges in adopting in the enterprise and in a way that it is fast and efficient. And let's see some of these challenges, what we see across the board from a retailer perspective. So one of the first challenge is the interdependencies on other data. So today, a lot of different departments that we talked about do not share data, and the decisions that you make typically interdependent, right? So if you increase a price on a certain item, the demand will have an impact, and then that impact will reflect in terms of the inventories that you carry, and that impact, if it impacts the inventory, then it impacts the entire supply chain from a logistics, warehouse, and everything perspective. So every decision that you make has so many connections through your entire value chain. And considering that you're making these decisions for almost 35 crore products, the complexity at which what you're dealing is really, really huge. And so it is important that you understand that when one decision is made, what is its impact on every other decision which happens inside the value chain. Now, the other thing about is that when enterprises want to kind of adopt and imbibe AI across the entire value chain, they want to adopt in such a way that it kind of fits into their processes. It's not something that the algorithms change the business process, but it fits into the process. Obviously, there will be some certain ways in which they will get better, but how can you bring in more efficiency rather than change that entire process is what many enterprises are looking for. Now, what happens, another challenge what we see is the underlying assumptions. So a lot of these decisions, if you see in the entire value chain, are made at various different time period. Like for example, a space decision is something which is made for a long period of time, like maybe a year period of time, versus a pricing decision is something which is made multiple times in a day. Now, when you are looking at the data and when you're looking at the overall effect of how the intelligence and how the insights kind of really play, it is important to have the contextual view of now, and as well as the big picture of all the other things which are happening, across the board. So it is important to understand that how a decision in pricing impacts the decision in space and vice versa, considering these long timelines. Also, because you have these different timelines, there are certain assumptions which are made when you consider and when you make these decisions. Like, for example, you might have to kind of consider a certain, variation in price when you're making a space decision over a longer period of time, versus when it actually happens, the prices might be very different. And that's where you need to kind of have a constant mechanism so that these assumptions, what you took when you made that decisions, are constantly updated so that the decision and the results and the impact is constantly measured in the right way. So it's important that all of that is baselined so that the impact is right, and then the corrections which happened on the top of it can flow back in and the model is more accurate. So the underlying assumptions are very important in terms of as you go through from a model accuracy perspective. Also, the faster time to value. How can you get AI to really, get to that faster time of value? Data cleansing and data sufficiency is always a holy grail for most companies, and that's where you need to kind of figure out what are the use cases for which you have already got the data. What are the data use cases that you really want to kind of drive in future? It's important to kind of make a combination of all of that, and then looking at an architecture which can really take into account your current team's capability and the ability to plug in any third-party algorithms or solutions becomes very essential when you design your architecture from an AI at an enterprise level. And given the current, talent crunch, it is important that organizations also make AI simple to use so that it does not require a whole fleet which essentially is, servicing it. It is helping them to configure it. How can you make AI so simple that it is self-configurable? You can make your configurations or make your apps on your own, so the business users themselves can leverage it without requiring a lot of technical background. So that becomes very important. And then it is also essential that you future-proof your business so that you take into account all the future needs and evolve as the business is evolving. And that brings us to a view on how this enterprise can be configured. So it is a connected, composable, algorithmic enterprise, which can really help you to drive the AI in every business process, imbibe AI in every business process, and actually leverage the benefits through the entire process. Now, how does this algorithmic enterprise look like? And this is a quick view of how it could be set up. Now, this requires many organizations have already invested in a data lake or a data platform which ingest all this data. Now, what goes on top of it is very essential. Once you have this entire data platform, it is essential to build the algo ready data layer on top of it. This is the layer where you kind of bring in the data, configure it. All of that becomes very important. On top of it is your algo layer. Now, this is where you have your AI ops, you have your pipelines, you have all your algorithmic libraries, and libraries which are configured so that it can be used cross purposes. And then here is again where you can tie in some of your third party algorithms also. Now, on top of this are your packaged business capabilities. Now, these business capabilities are things which could be composable across the enterprise. These could be things like, for example, how do I look up an item, or how do I look up a price, or how do I configure a price, which could be leveraged by multiple departments and which could be plug and play for each one of them. So if a business user is composing a certain application, they could just like pick up, okay, I need to kind of look up an item, I need to look up a price, and I need a recommendation on some of these things. So they could just compose it easily. So that makes it very easy to use from a business perspective, and at the same time helps you build that organization where you can actually imbibe AI in that every process. And then on top of this is the UX framework. Now, this is a low code, no code UX framework which is available today, where business users can just drag and drop and build this application based on what their requirement is. And as a business changes, this can be updated and by simple drag and drops and composing that application. And then on top of it is how do you kind of look at certain business function and optimize them. This is how you solve a business problem. And then this kind of rolls up into how do you really solve a purpose-driven business problem, which could be things like, as I was talking about, where a retailer said that I will not carry any product which has artificial ingredients in it. And when you have to make a bold promise, you need to look at various different aspects in your enterprise, right? From how do I de-risk my business because I already have a business which is doing X amount. If 90% of my business today has packaged products which have artificial ingredients in them, then I need to really look at how can I remove them, what will I replace it with, and then how can I de-risk it. Similarly, it has an impact on supply chain, it has an impact on others. So how can you bring all of these different functions and optimizations together so that you can actually drive that purpose? Similarly, how can you drive the circular fashion, or how can you drive your purpose in terms of hunger for none and food for all? So a lot of such purposes can be drawn with the power of AI, and imbibing that in that entire business process and every business function. So that's all I had for today. Really looking forward to interacting with all of you, and hopefully this helps you to kind of open your perspective in terms of various use cases which are available in retail, and how can you really build a connected, composable enterprise which can help you and get you ready to imbibe AI in every process. So thank you so much.